Sorry, 18 minutes behind. Alright, back to the commentary. Alright, so now we're coming into the first level that's on the Salvation. And we get a nice long cutscene, so yay, story time. So this is kind of the first level where the fast dashing makes a big difference in time because it's a very long level and it involves a lot of running around. You get a lot of these long hallways. You just need to get through them as fast as you can. And this is another little thing where it says hold right trigger. You just tap it once and that's all you really need to do. And then just mash A. Actually, one thing I was really glad to find out is that a lot of things like doors like that, you don't actually have to hold right trigger. You can just tap it once and and it locks you into that animation. Which I find makes mashing the other button a lot easier to do if I don't have to also hold right trigger. So, this is a new mechanic here. Got these power cells. Need to use lightning to power them up. And now we get an elevator. This elevator is going to crash. Little trick I use here is I mash the saber attack button. That'll kind of get me in the air right at the end instead of having like a hard fall, which just saves a little bit of time because you don't have to sit through the hard fall animation. Little trick here. There's going to be a little droid like that one over there. It's going to try to grab me as soon as I go through this door. But if I do a dashing blast through it, it usually misses. Which means I can start moving this thing right away. Now this one did grab me, but I got the power cell into the door first, so it doesn't really matter. And I just do this little saber lightning combo to clear out the rest of the little droids as fast as possible. And this is where the game unlocks the repulse ability, which I really wish we could have earlier in the run, but it is what it is. But the reason I try to get that power cell into the door before I get the little tutorial there for repulse is because the little spider droids start spawning in really fast after you get that tutorial, and they will make it a real nightmare to try and move that power cell. But the first wave that's in that room is usually much nicer, and they'll usually let you get that in there pretty quick. So first thing you gotta do here is come over this way, just to see this cutscene. And definitely do not try to skip this cutscene because, well, two reasons. One, you can't. And two, reloading that checkpoint would make it so that the enemy in this room would actually spawn the way it's supposed to. We don't want that. So kind of a funny thing with this game is that if you get to certain areas fast enough, enemies don't spawn. It works really nicely in our favor for a lot of this level, because the enemies are really annoying if they do spawn. Like you see, he would normally be in this room and attacking me right now, but he's just kind of not there. Means I don't have to worry about dealing with them as I'm moving this thing across the room. And we also drop it on the ground and use force push, because this is one of the few items in the game that you can't actually just throw anywhere. Like, you can grip it and move it around, but the game will not allow you to throw it, which is unfortunate, because throwing it across the room would be very fast. Get that one in there, and then come up to the store, and I'm going to do a repulse before the door opens. And that just breaks that glass wall that was there, so that it's actually breaking during this cutscene instead of, you know, waiting until I get control back and then breaking through it. And another door, we just tap grip once and then mash A. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of dashing. Now we get to this chasm. Now this chasm's kind of interesting. Like, dying in here doesn't get you a full death animation. It just kind of pops you right back in with no loading screen. I guess they just really expect you to fall quite a bit. But normally for this level you're supposed to go through these rooms, find power cells to open up the doors. But instead you can just make that jump. And we're at the end. Ah, yes. Now, we get to the first engine room. Let's see what kind of engine room skips I can manage to pull off. Okay. So, a couple of ways you can get through this thing. You can wait for them to turn off. Then you can just go right through. You can do what I just did in the first one, where I kind of jump into one. Did it the first time, now I can't do it again. Where you bump into one, and when you bump into one, the damage that you take in the air kind of clips you inside of the other one. I'm not going to be able to get it now because I'm trying now. There we go. The damage from the first one clipped me inside the second one. And if I'm inside the second one while they're still on... Okay, well it bumped me out when it turned on, but you could dash out of it without taking any more damage. The other way is that you can actually dash right between the middle of them. I don't know if you can do it with this one in particular. No, it looks like you can, I just messed it up. I'll get to that another try later. If these are on when you get here, you can kind of jump through this little gap without taking damage. Or you can just wait for them to turn off. Normally you're supposed to use grip to slow this thing down and get it to stop spinning so you can jump through. If you get up here and just spam dash, you just kind of zip on through it. And this, there is another way around, but we want this force point holocron. We just kind of wait for those. So I'm just going to jump through, and jump around, get to another one of these. Now these, because there's 4, you do not want to end up in the middle of all 4 when they turn on. Because if you do get stuck in the middle, you're just going to bounce around between all 4 of them and probably die from the damage that you take. So, you feel really stupid when it happens. And here's a little skip you can do. Because the game conveniently kind of wants you to do that skip because they put that holocron up there. If you land on top, you can just jump over here and not have to fight any enemies or solve the puzzle in the room to get out this side. I think I'm near the door. So, annoying thing, it's hard to tell if you're positioned right to be at this door when it gets to the top because this elevator spins all the way up. I'm gonna get in here, and this is where we get to the boss fight. Now at the end of this little scene, you're going to see in the bottom right another checkpoint indicator. And when that comes up, I'm going to swap my costume. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to reload that checkpoint. Because reloading that is going to skip the second cutscene that would play, or the second half of the cutscene that's in the boss room. So that saves you a little bit of time. Also, reloading this checkpoint is important because sometimes when you get to this fight, the boss just doesn't spawn in inside of its own fight. We don't know why, it just kind of doesn't sometimes. But reloading the checkpoint guarantees that it will spawn. I'm trying to move around this central pillar at a certain speed. I don't want the boss to get too close to me, but I also don't want to get too far ahead of it that it turns around early. I don't want it to turn around until I'm getting to this fourth pillar that I'm lifting up. Because if I can manipulate its movement just right, it'll be pretty close to me after this cutscene ends, and I can just go right into attacking it without having to chase it around. This is also the point where I upgrade saber damage. You might wonder, wouldn't that have helped right before I did the saber throw? No, because saber throw is entirely separate from saber damage. Here, there's a specific combo that I want to do. It's the combo that's 3 saber hits and then lightning. That's the fastest way to push damage in this fight. You also kind of get stuck inside of the boss's hitbox right there. Now we're just trying to get around the room quickly, because we have to put all of these power cells back in place. There's also a lot of enemies that spawn into this fight that we're just trying to ignore. And if you take too long doing any of these, they will hit you, and you don't want them to hit you. You also kind of have to watch out for that AoE thing that was just coming out from the center. Once you get this last one, the boss's shield goes down again, and we just kind of repeat the same thing as the first phase. I'm just going to charge up a saber throw. There, you just need to deal enough damage for it to fall. And the nice thing about this particular combo that I'm doing against this boss is that there's kind of an AoE from the lightning that keeps the rest of the enemies away from me while I'm hitting the boss, which is very nice. And I'm just going to turn it towards the center, hold down the dash button, and I'm going to start mashing A so that it triggers this scene as early as possible. And once you go through that scene, all of the extra enemies that spawned will despawn, which is very nice. Now, there's actually 2 ways that you can get out of this room. The fastest way is to jump on top of its head here and jump out, but like you can see, its head likes to, doesn't like you to stand on it. So you have to kind of get on it and then get up here pretty quickly. Otherwise you're just going to kind of slide around and fall off. The other way is to use grip. Bring the boss's body down, jump up here, and then jump across. You can go for whichever one works better for you. I tend to go off of its head because it's a little bit quicker. Then we come over here, and that's the end of that level. And then we go into the second half of the salvation. Alright, so for the salvation, it starts off with a pretty big fight in this room. And I'll try to explain how I'm going through the fight quickly while trying not to mess any of it up. I start by going to the right. I'm going to throw this barrel, because that will kill that saber-wielding enemy very quickly. Or as soon as I say that, he didn't actually die to it. And this one just destroyed the barrel. Alright, he died. You can tell because he dropped his sabers. Okay, those saber guys are the only really annoying ones at the start of this fight. You just want to get rid of them quickly. Here I like to run up, use repulse to kill the stormtroopers. But then we get these two droid enemies. They're quite annoying to deal with. Like saber throw deals with them pretty quickly. Like a charged saber throw will kill those smaller ones like immediately. It won't kill the AT-ST immediately. You'll have to, or is it AT-AT? I always get those mixed up. That one you'll have to do a bit more damage to. This one we get quite a few enemies. If you're going for trying to get through this fight really fast, after you cleared out that first cargo thing that flew in, you would get up here, and you would wait up here until this wave spawns, because then you could deal with these snipers immediately. And then come back down here to deal with these guys. So I'm just going to kind of do some saber throws and some lightning, and hope that I get a decent amount of splash damage going all around. You see that little A prompt come up there, that means it's really close to dying. I also have this stormtrooper kind of running around and hiding from me. But once every enemy in the room is dead, you get that little scene, and you can see from down here, that little highlight come up. That means I'm targeting it. And anything at all that you hit that with will break it. Like you can use grip, you can use saber throw, you could use push, you can zap it once with lightning. Anything at all that hits those will break them, and then you can move on. And it also doesn't matter where you go after breaking that second one or where you position yourself in the room. That little scene that plays will always spawn you right here in the middle of the room. So we just make our way over here. And I make sure not to dash in the air before I get in this tube, because I want to have that dash still useful once I get to the bottom. And now we get some more engine room stuff. So this is one where if you time it and position it and your angle is just right, you can get through the middle of these. Unfortunately, if you get stuck in the middle, you're going to take a whole bunch of damage and then you risk dying. That's why the better way to do it is to kind of try and dash into one of them up in the air. And land inside another one and then dash out. And these things, same as before, just get up here and dash through it. I always forget this one. A couple of ways you can go. You can jump over these, and again try to zip through the middle of these kind of laser tubes. But this one in particular also has a little gap right there you can just kind of pop through. It's actually much easier. Also, you can kind of skip that little lightning prompt. If you're spamming lightning right as you walk into that prompt, it just kind of doesn't happen. But it's not really a big time loss if you get it. This is another one you can dash through the middle. Just like that, never even touch the sides. You can also do the version where you jump and kind of fall inside of the other one. This one, you have to use lightning to destroy these. And this game really doesn't like to let you target the ones that you want to target. But you destroy those and you get through here. Now this next room is the first place where I'm actually going to use Force Fury since the tutorial in the first level. If it works out the way that it's supposed to, I should be able to just use Fury and then, jump up in the air and repulse twice, and then that should clear the entire room. Because kind of a weird thing with this next room is it's another one where not all of the enemies spawn right away, and the trigger to be able to exit the room is killing all of the enemies in the room. So if you manage to do the Fury Repulse and kill everything that has already spawned in the room, the game will think that you've actually killed everything that spawns in the room in total, even though not everything is actually spawned there. So I'm just kind of tricking the game into thinking that I've cleared this entire fight without actually clearing the entire fight. So this should have killed everything already. Like, it should have killed everything with 2 instead of 5. So that's kind of a problem for me later in the run, because I have a lot less fury left in that meter than I normally would. And I'm going to want to use that fury repulse later on to clear out another room. Now, this is another chasm room. You lower the first platform, and you can see there's a second platform over there. You don't actually need to lower the second one, because you can just do some fancier jumps and not have to deal with it. Like, you can jump here, and get to here. Do a dash off, and then a dash back, and a dash off, and a dash back. And we're at the end. You know, just like the first half of the Salvation, we also have a few spots in the second half where we're trying to get through the level quick enough that the enemies don't spawn. And this room is the first one where it very clearly did not happen the way I wanted it to, because this big guy should not be here. Like, he absolutely should not have spawned. And he is a really big problem if he's standing over there. So, ideally, he would just be shooting fire at me after I pick that thing up, so that I can just move it to the door and then leave. Unfortunately for me, he's doing the full body ram, which is knocking me down as I try to move the power cell. But normally in this level, that enemy wouldn't have spawned. Luckily, this room, none of them actually did spawn. This is another one where I'm going to toss this in this direction. What did I just say about enemies not spawning? Thank you. Anyway. Another one where I use push to get the power cell over to the store quicker than actually carrying it or throwing it would get it there. Just need to move that up a little bit so that you can get under it. Do a little dash off of the edge and then dash in the air. Should land on the far side. I just tap grip to open that up. Tap it once more. Get the cell moving. Then grab it, zap it, move it to the door. This is a room where enemies would have spawned inside that little tube there, but because we got here quick enough, they did not spawn. There's normally a big fight in this room, and we just don't have to deal with it. Now, we need to get this power cell over to that turret. Debris is not being kind. You might be wondering, why don't I take the power cell from this one? Because if you try, it gets destroyed. That's why you see me just run right by and completely ignore that first turret, even though it's got a power cell in it that you would think I could use. But then we just zap the turret to break open the door up here. Now we actually do need the enemies to start spawning again. So I hit that checkpoint and I reload. Because this next room is another one where I have to kill all of the enemies in the room. And this room can't be tricked like that other room I was just in a little bit ago. I do actually have to kill everything that would normally spawn in here. Snipers are being quite annoying. I'm just kind of firing lightning everywhere and make sure everybody dies, because as soon as everyone dies, you get this cutscene. And you need this cutscene to happen in order to get up on top of this cannon. Otherwise you just don't really have a way up there. Oh, you also can't do anything once you're up there if that scene didn't play. Let me get up here, mash lightning, and then hold B. You can start holding B before the prompt appears on the screen, it'll still count. And then we get this nice elevator ride. Funny thing, if you destroy these panels here, it will actually make the elevator ride slower, so don't do that. It looks funny though. But you get this checkpoint here. Normally this is where I would actually close and restart the game, because my game has a pretty high tendency towards crashing at the end of this level. And that checkpoint is actually the last one you get before this level ends, so if it crashes, you have to replay this section, which is really unpleasant. But since my game already crashed earlier, I should be okay. We were just using Repulse to kill all the little droids. This section will continue until all of the droids are dead. Always just one left at the end. Funny little bug at this part. Your position is locked during the crash, so if you jump right as it's crashing, you just kind of float in the air there and it looks funny. Yeah, now we're back on Camino, because this game likes to make you go through the same levels multiple times. Boy, that looks weird. That looks very weird. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and restart that. Looks like it's loading me into the right level, though. Hey, we got a functioning video game. Alright, so this is another section where the faster you do the inputs for the QuickTime event, the faster you'll get through the section. So while this seems like it's entirely an auto-scroller, you can speed it up by mashing faster. I don't remember exactly how much time difference it makes. I know it's been tested, I just can't quite remember. I think it was something like 15-20 seconds though, just by mashing faster. So really, nothing fancy going on here, just mashing buttons. At this point, the next input is going to be to hold B to break out the window in front of me. I can just start holding B now, it'll work. This game doesn't really care if you start pressing the button early, as long as you're pressing it when it wants you to be pressing it, it counts. And because if there's any one word that can be used to describe this game, it is consistency. This is the one falling section where mashing the dash button actually does not make it faster. Every other falling section, spamming dash will get you to the end faster, except for this one. This one, there's nothing you can do to speed it up. Alright, so after this little scene here, we are actually coming up on another fairly big skip for this game. Because this scene drops me off in an area. It's a lot like one of the first areas in the game, where you normally have to fight a bunch of enemies before you can open up the door to leave. But because this game has this property of QuickTime events ending faster if you mash the button faster, what you can actually do is begin the QuickTime event to move that debris away from the door. And we can actually get it out of there. Just like that. Because there are these two turrets that are going to be shooting at me the whole time I'm down here. Normally those are supposed to make it so it's impossible to open up that door without getting shot first. Because normally they're going to shoot you and interrupt the QuickTime event that you're using to open the door. But if you mash through it fast enough, you can open the door before they hit you and you can just leave. And that skips the entire fight in that room. And it is a fantastic skip because the fight in that room is awful. And now that we're done with that big skip, we get another even bigger skip. So I'll describe it in just a second. This is another skip that abuses taking damage in the air to reset your jump counter. And that's going to allow me to cross this huge gap. Okay, so now that I'm over here, I can take a moment. You can see the room I came from is that one over there. Normally you have to fight your way through that room to get to that room. Then you have to fight your way through that room to get to that room. And then you have to fight your way through that room to get to that room. And then you have to do a puzzle to get across that bridge. And getting across that bridge gets you to this room right in front of me. So by going across the gap, we skip a whole bunch of fighting, and I just fell. That's right, that's a weird little jump at the end. It's actually fairly easy, I just tried to go for a little too early. And I do that little saber swing right at the end because that stops me from taking a hard fall. Because if you fall more than a certain distance, you would normally get a hard fall animation at the end. But if you swing your sabers right before you hit the ground, it kind of resets the fall timer, and you don't take a hard fall. So, there. Now, if you land on this kind of dark texture, you'll land on an invisible floor in here. And then once you're in here, just going to jump out, then in through this window. And as soon as I step on this elevator, you see I kind of warp to the place where that elevator normally would be. And I can just move on with the level. So, this part's fairly straightforward, just running past everybody. Trying not to get hit in the face with rockets if we can avoid it. Usually not this many enemies will spawn in here. That's probably because I fell in the previous section, just didn't get here quick enough to avoid them spawning. Let me get onto this elevator. And once I'm on here, I'm going to want to switch costume or quit and continue to reload this checkpoint because I need the enemies in this room to spawn. Like I said earlier, because I used up too much of the Fury meter the last time that I used it, I don't have enough to immediately use it here. Which is kind of unfortunate because it really speeds up this room a lot if I have a Fury meter to burn. The more of these little droids that I kill with repulse at a time, the faster that meter will build back up. There we go. You can see Repulse, when you've got Fury active, also has a lightning effect, and it has a much larger area of effect and deals more damage. So it's very effective at clearing rooms like that just have lots of enemies in them. Now we get to one of the two most stressful rooms in the game because it's all platforming. And a lot of the platforming in this section doesn't give you a good sense of depth perception. Yeah, okay, I should explain a little bit better what I'm doing here. I need a little bit more height in order to land on one of those platforms. And these little things here, conveniently, are just enough height to do that. And then, when you do the dashing blast at the end, it just kind of pops you up on top. And the game's auto-aim, just this game's lovely little auto-aim, sent me off to the right of where I was actually aiming, because it thought I wanted to hit that stormtrooper with a dashing blast. And actually I wanted to land on the platform in order to not die. There. Once I get up to here, I can actually jump up on top of this and get a little height there. And you just get up here, and then you get onto this thing. And this is one of the trickier jumps. You need to get around that thing on the left and land in here. And you're going to jump up onto the side here to get just a little bit of extra height. There. And then you do a double jump, and you do 3 saber swings in the air to get a little bit more height, and that lets you land up on top of this. And once you're up there, you just kind of continue through the room on the pretty much the intended path. Over here. You get over to this. Now normally you'd have to kill these two guys, but and if you can mash fast enough in between their attacks, you can get past. Same with this one. And I do a repulse just to kind of get him to leave me alone just long enough to mash my way through the door. There's an out of bounds you can actually do to get to the other side of this door. It's a really precise out of bounds, like you have to land in exactly the right spot. You kind of end up stuck inside the door frame over here, and you would hit the checkpoint for this room. If you miss it though, you just end up stuck out of bounds, and then you can't do anything, and it's a huge time loss. Generally you find that it's faster just to be able to mash your way through the doors. And this is the other most stressful room, because depth perception is not this game's strong suit. And you need to land on these things. Ooh, wasn't sure I was going to make that one. Then we get a little trick jump here. Because normally you need to use grip to bring this little bridge down, but you can jump off the top of that glass tube. And it gets you high enough up that you can actually get across. And then once you get on this elevator, this little cutscene that plays is actually a level transition. It doesn't behave like any of the others because you cannot pause it, you cannot skip it, and then it just kind of puts you here. Now, this is the weird, like, dark side cave from episode 5, where you just get weird visions and hallucinations, and you actually can't control the camera angle whatsoever, so you get some really obnoxious camera angles. Then we get a handful of quick time events, some flashbacks. There's really nothing you can do to speed this part up besides, walk along the shortest path. These are also a few of the very few QuickTime events that are actually random. Most QuickTime events in this game are pretty much preset. But in some of these Vader sections, you'll get hold up and mash X, and then something, and then hold up and mash X. It's the middle one that has a chance of being random. It can either be X, left trigger, or pulled down on the left stick. And there's really no good way of predicting which one you're going to get, because it all happens pretty quickly. You just have to react to it. This one's preset, though. Nice waggle the left stick. But now we're done with this weird little section, and we're coming up to the first half of the boss fight with Vader. Now, this is the last point where I upgrade something, and I'm going to upgrade Mind Trick. And you might be wondering, why would I upgrade Mind Trick for a boss fight with Vader? There can't be any way I can mind trick Vader into killing himself, and you're right, you can't. So, there's kind of a lot of things to talk about in this fight, and the first one has to do with animations, like I would have mentioned way back in the first video for this. Vader also has various different animations that you can use to your advantage. If you just go in and attack him with sabers, he has a certain animation that he does that blocks saber attacks. If you try to hit him with lightning, he has a specific animation that he does to block lightning attacks. And what we can do with this is I can run up and use a lightning attack, and then he's locked into the animation that blocks a lightning attack for kind of a while. And while he's locked in that animation, I'm free to just go ham with saber attacks and deal as much damage as I'd like. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to deal as much damage as I'd like because this game's just not that nice to me. But it's a way to just push damage that's very consistent. So I'm just going to lightning. And if I could lock on. Okay, so he goes into that animation. That means he's summoning the clones. And the clones are the reason that I get Mind Trick. Oh, that was a very weird first phase of the fight, because he's just going directly into the second phase of the fight. And this is a cutscene that you actually can skip. So we do. So, swap costume, and we just kind of spawn here in the place where we would be after that cutscene. Get to this part, where Vader's trying to throw some glass tubes at me. We just have to hit him with 3. Although this game being as consistent as it is, sometimes you only have to hit him with 1, and he'll move on from this section. Star Killer, throw the thing, please. There. Okay, I hit him with 3, that brings down this platform so I can get over here. Alright, so like I mentioned, I'm going to use Mind Trick to get some clones to fight for me, and that gets Vader to focus on the clones instead of me, which means I get a chance to hit him a whole bunch while he's not paying attention. So the reason that you normally lose time in this fight is just because the clones also just really like to mess with you while you're trying to fight Vader. And this is a cutscene you cannot skip. Yeah, but the clones have a habit of not just leaving you alone. Normally here you'd have to throw the tubes back at Vader again, but you can just make the jump up here anyway. Just kind of skip it. Once we get to this phase, start being on platforms that have some tubes, so you can throw the tubes at Vader for free damage. And mind trick some clones, and wail away on Vader. You also want to be careful during this fight, because after Vader moves to a new platform... Really, game? You're just going to eat my inputs like that? As I was saying, when Vader moves to a new platform, the game always lets you move for a second, and then it stops you to show this little scene. If you happen to be jumping between platforms while that scene is playing, you will fall to your death. It's also random that sometimes you will get this QuickTime event during the fight. So, like I said before, the way you lose time in this fight isn't even to Vader being a problem, it's the clones hitting you and interrupting you while you're trying to deal with Vader that slows you down. Also, it's extremely rare that you get this QuickTime event more than once in the fight. I don't know why I'm getting it again. And the timing with it is also random, so I had already dealt pretty much all of the damage I needed to deal in that phase, so the QuickTime event didn't even get me any bonus damage. And there's clones hitting me right now from the other platform. There's nothing at all I can do about that. Like, I can try to dodge it, but it's not reliable. Yeah, this fight's not being nice to me right now. You also have the option of just ignoring the clones entirely, like not mind tricking any of them, just trying to do this little manipulation on Vader where you get him stuck in the lightning blocking animation and then hit him with the sabers. It is also an option. It's fast if it works, but it's very unlikely to work, and really, 3 QuickTime events in the middle of the fight. I mean, I usually get 1. I never see 2, and I definitely never see 3. But at least that one was early in this phase, so it dealt the full amount of damage, so it's not the worst thing, but it's not exactly good either. But this is actually the end of the first phase of the fight. Now we get a nice long cutscene before we go into the last phase, and unfortunately, it's another cutscene we can't skip. Alright, so we're coming up on the final fight of the game. There's also a chance that Vader just doesn't spawn in this fight. It's rare, but it happens. Ah, he's there. So I start this fight, shoot him with lightning once, then spam saber, because I actually want the quick time events in this part of the fight. As unlike the first half of the fight, where the quick time event only deals a little bit of damage, you'll see one quick time event in this phase of the fight takes half of his health. It seems a little bit slow to sit through the quick time event every time, but this amount of damage entirely for free is worth it. From the timing I've done, getting that quick time event just twice in a row is the fastest way to do this fight. So I need him to move away from the wall a little bit. And hopefully pushing him back towards the wall again, just like that. Perfect. That's pretty much a perfect fight here. Oh, there's the left trigger. So yeah, getting this quick time event twice in a row is a lot faster than trying to actually kill him. And once you get his health down to the bottom like that, you can fail the rest of the quick time event, because the rest of it just doesn't matter. Now we're just playing out the end of the game. You can tell I already know which button I'm supposed to be pressing. Almost like I've played this part before. Anyway, that part right there is actually the final QuickTime event. The game is going to lie to you and tell you that there's one more QuickTime event after this where you have to mash Y in order to just kind of deal the killing blow in this fight. But you don't. The Y prompt on the screen is nothing. It's just a blinking Y button on the screen. I can press Y all I want, or I can ignore it entirely. It goes on for the exact same amount of time either way, and you can't fail. Even though the fight's over, that's not quite where we call time yet, because there is still one last input that you have to do in order to end the game. So after this dialogue plays out, you have to hit either right bumper or left bumper to pick whether you want the good ending or the bad ending. And that is the only moral choice in the entire game. But we call time after that final input. Right there is where we call time. Alright, and that is The Force Unleashed 2 any %.